You can't be selfish. Elise. Kayla needs this venue. Her fiancé is, well, he's important. My father, Robert, didn't even look up from his steak as he said it. He cut a perfect slice of medium-rare beef. The knife scraping against the porcelain plate, a sound that felt louder than a scream in the quiet restaurant. We were supposed to be celebrating the finalization of my wedding plans. The glass house. My glass house. Instead, I sat frozen, my hands gripping the linen napkin until my knuckles turned white. My mother, Susan, nodded in agreement, sipping her wine as if they were discussing the weather. Not the theft of my dream. Exactly, she chimed in. You can get married anywhere. Honey, the backyard is lovely this time of year. But Kayla, she needs the prestige. You understand, don't you? It wasn't a question. It was an order. A demand to erase myself. Again. So my sister could shine. Before I tell you what I did when they tried to take the one thing that was mine, drop a comment below. Have you ever had to fight for something that was rightfully yours, against the people who were supposed to protect you? I want to hear your story. I didn't scream. I didn't flip the table. In movies, betrayal is loud and dramatic. A crashing crescendo of shattered glass and weeping. But in real life, sitting there in that velvet-lined booth, the betrayal was quiet. It was the soft clink of my father's fork returning to his plate. It was the way my mother smoothed the tablecloth, refusing to meet my eyes. It was the suffocating silence that filled the space where my family's love should have been. I looked at Justin. He was sitting next to me, wearing his worn flannel shirt, the cuffs slightly frayed. There was dirt under his fingernails, honest. Dark soil from the work we'd done that morning. In this room of polished silver and $300 bottles of wine, he looked completely out of place. And yet, he was the only thing that felt real. He didn't look angry. He didn't look hurt. He looked amused. He took a sip of his water, his eyes meeting mine with a steady, grounding, calm. He knew something they didn't. But in that moment, I realized I knew something, too. For a split second, my mouth opened to say, okay, that is the most terrifying part of this story. Not their cruelty, but my own conditioning. There is an invisible chain that binds the spare child to the golden one. It isn't made of iron. It's made of years of small concessions. It's forged in the moments when you are told that your needs are too much, that your dreams are distractions, and that your role is to be the fuel for someone else's fire. I had been wearing that chain for 29 years. I had learned to make myself small so Kayla could have more room. I had learned that my value was measured only by how much I could sacrifice to keep the peace. But looking at my father's indifferent face, something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud crack. It was the quiet, final sound of a lock clicking open. I wasn't just a daughter being asked a favor. I was an architect being asked to burn down her own building so her sister could play in the ashes. I stood up. The movement was sudden enough that the waiter paused mid-step. Elise, sit down, my mother hissed, her voice dropping to that dangerous, sharp whisper she used when appearances were threatened. Don't make a scene. Kayla has sponsors coming. People are flying in. We can't just change the date for her. You're being unreasonable. Unreasonable, I repeated. The word tasted like copper. I built that place. I didn't rent it. I cleared the vines. I glazed the windows. I didn't just find a venue. Mother, I resurrected it. And that's why it's perfect for Kayla, she said, as if that explained everything. It fits her brand. The backyard is more you. It fits your budget. I looked at them, really looked at them, for the first time in years. I didn't see parents. I saw parasites in designer clothing. They didn't love me. They loved what I could provide. They loved my compliance. And tonight, they had overdrafted their account with me for the last time. I reached for my purse. I didn't throw my drink. I didn't cry. I just looked my father in the eye, channeling every ounce of cold, hard clarity I had found in that silence. "Enjoy the dinner," I said, my voice steady and low. "It is the last thing I am ever paying for." I turned and walked out of the restaurant, the heavy oak door closing behind me with a finality that felt like a vault sealing shut. I walked into the cool night air, leaving my family, my guilt, and my old life sitting at table 4. Most people look at the glass house and see a venue. They see the 30-foot vaulted ceilings, the imported Italian tiles, and the way the light hits the orchid wall at sunset, perfect for a magazine spread, perfect for Kayla's Instagram feed. They see a finished product, a stage for their vanity, but they didn't see it 3 years ago. I drove home from the restaurant in silence, my mind drifting back to the day I found the property. It wasn't a venue then. It was a ruin. It was a jagged scar of broken glass and rusted iron, hidden deep in a forgotten corner of the pine forest. The real estate listing had called it a teardown. The roof had collapsed in 3 places. The floor was a carpet of rot and dead leaves. My father had laughed when I told him I bought it. A money pit, he'd called it. Just like your career, Elise, always digging in the dirt. He didn't know that dirt was where I found my life. I spent every weekend for 2 years on that land. I didn't hire a flashy construction crew. I couldn't afford one. I did the work myself. I learned how to reglaze antique window panes until my fingers were covered in tiny, white scars. I learned how to mix mortar, how to lay irrigation lines, how to coax life back into soil that had been poisoned by neglect. It wasn't just a renovation, it was a resurrection. I poured my savings, my sweat, and my soul into those foundations. And Justin, my family sees a gardener because they saw him unloading mulch from a truck one time. They saw his flannel shirt and his work boots and decided that was all he was. They didn't see him at 2 in the morning, holding the flashlight while I welded a support beam. They didn't see him calculating the load-bearing capacity of the trusses with an engineer's precision, sketching complex hydraulic systems on the back of a napkin to save the old oak tree in the courtyard. He wasn't just hired help. He was the one who carried the heavy glass panels when my strength failed. He was the one who pulled me up from the floor when I was crying from exhaustion, telling me that we were building something that would last. We bled for that place. We built it. Pain by pain. Breath by breath. It wasn't just a building. It was the physical manifestation of our partnership. To my parents, the glass house was just a pretty backdrop that cost $45,000 to rent a fee they assumed I couldn't really afford, unaware that I didn't pay rent on a building I owned. To Kayla, it was just content for her sponsors. But to me, it was proof that I could create something beautiful in a world that told me I was nothing. That was why I couldn't give it to her. It wasn't selfishness. It was self-preservation. Handing over the keys to Kayla wouldn't just be changing a wedding date. It would be handing over the only thing in my life that was undeniably, irrevocably mine. And I knew, with a cold certainty, that if I let her stand on that altar, she wouldn't just use the venue. She would consume it. She would take the credit for the beauty, just like she took the credit for everything else. And I would be left in the shadows again. Sweeping up the confetti after her parade, I pulled into the driveway of our small, dusty rental house, the one my mother turned her nose up at. The lights were on inside. Justin was waiting. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly what I had to do. I wasn't going to negotiate. I wasn't going to compromise. I was going to war. For 3 days, I didn't say a word. I didn't answer the 47 missed calls. I didn't reply to the long, rambling text messages from my mother that oscillated between guilt-tripping. "We just want everyone to be happy," and outright hostility. "You are destroying this family over a party." I simply let the silence stretch, heavy and suffocating, waiting for them to realize the magnitude of their mistake. I thought the silence might make them pause. I thought it might force them to reflect. But I had forgotten the cardinal rule of narcissists when they meet resistance. They don't back down. They escalate. It happened on a Tuesday night. I was sitting in my studio, the blue light of my laptop illuminating the architectural renderings for a new municipal park project. When my phone lit up with a notification, it wasn't a text. It was an Instagram tag. My stomach dropped before I even unlocked the screen. There it was. A photo of the glass house, my glass house. It was an old photo. One I had taken myself just after finishing the roof restoration, capturing the way the sunset turned the glass into liquid gold. I had sent it to our family group chat 6 months ago. Proud of my progress. Now. It was on Kayla's feed. The caption read, "Finally secured the dream spot. So incredibly blessed to have a family that makes magic happen. Save the date June 15th. June 15th. My date." I stared at the screen. The pixels burning into my retinas. She hadn't just stolen the venue. She had stolen the photo, the date, and the narrative. In the comments, sponsors and influencers were already gushing. "OMG, huge congrats. That venue is literally to die for. You deserve this. Babe." Kayla was liking every single comment. She was accepting congratulations for a wedding she hadn't planned, at a venue she didn't own, on a date she had stolen from her own sister. It was a public erasure. She was rewriting reality in real time, banking on the fact that I would be too nice, too compliant, to humiliate her by correcting the record. Then came the texts from my parents, buzzing in rapid succession like angry hornets. "Mom, since you're not answering, we assumed you came to your senses." Kayla went ahead and announced it. "Don't make a fuss now. It would look petty. Dad sent you a link to that community center on 4th Street. They have a gazebo. It's more Justin's speed anyway. Fits his lifestyle better than a glass palace." I opened the link. It was a public park, with a rusted metal gazebo, next to a muddy duck pond. Fits his lifestyle. The insult was so casual, so breathtakingly arrogant. They still thought Justin was a broke laborer scraping by on minimum wage. They thought they were doing us a favor by downgrading us to the mud so Kayla could ascend to the stars. "Mom, Justin is poisoning you against us. Elise, you never used to be this greedy. He's a gold digger making you fight for a venue you can't even afford, just to boost his own ego. Wake up." Greedy. They were calling me greedy for wanting to keep the building I constructed with my own hands. I put the phone down on the desk. Face up. I watched the notifications stack up, one after another, building a tower of entitlement and delusion. Anger didn't feel hot anymore. It felt cold. It felt clinical. I realized then that they weren't going to stop. They truly believed that if they bullied me hard enough, if they embarrassed me publicly enough, I would fold. They thought they were dealing with Elise, the daughter who just wanted to be loved. But they weren't dealing with a daughter anymore. They were dealing with a property owner, and they had just publicly claimed assets that didn't belong to them. I turned back to my laptop. I didn't open my messages to reply. I opened my files. I pulled up the deed, the operational contracts, and the vendor agreements. I wasn't going to argue with them on Instagram. I was going to evict them from my life. I didn't call my mother. I didn't text Kayla. I didn't engage in the emotional mud wrestling they were so desperate for. Instead, I opened a new browser tab and logged into the administrative portal for Verde Resorts, the holding company that technically owned the glass house. I wasn't Elise the daughter anymore. I was Elise the landlord. The first call I made was to the private security firm contracted to patrol the estate. "This is Elise," I said, my voice crisp and professional. "I need to update the access protocols for the property effective immediately. We are anticipating an unauthorized entry attempt." I gave them 4 names: Robert, Susan, Kayla, and her fiancé, Todd. I provided license plate numbers. I emailed over photos. These individuals are to be denied entry at the main gate. If they attempt to bypass security, contact local law enforcement for trespassing. Under no circumstances are they to set foot on the grounds. "Understood, ma'am," the security chief replied, updating the log now. Next. I contacted the high-end catering company my parents had bragged about hiring using my deposit money. Of course, I knew the owner. A sweet woman named Maria, who had catered several corporate events for Justin's other properties. Maria. It's Elise. I'm seeing a booking in your system for a wedding on June 15th at the Glass House under the name Kayla. I need to inform you that this event does not have a valid venue contract. The unauthorized party is attempting to host an event on private property without the owner's consent. There was a pause on the line. Oh my God. Elise. I had no idea. Your mother called and said you had transferred the reservation. My mother lied, I said bluntly. The venue is booked for a private event that day, my wedding. If you show up for Kayla, you'll be turned away. Cancel the contract now so you don't lose money. Done, Maria replied sharply. I don't work with people who steal venues. Then I moved online. I documented Kayla's Instagram posts using my photos and property. Filed a DMCA takedown with Instagram. And sent cease and desist letters to every brand she tagged, warning them their influencer was promoting an event she was legally barred from entering. I shut everything down calmly. Professionally, just logistics. No emotion. My father texted, saying my mother was crying and accusing me of being vindictive. I didn't reply. I wasn't being cruel. I was enforcing boundaries. The gate security would explain the rest. That week, my parents didn't call. Instead, they tried to force their way in early. I watched the security feed as they arrived with flowers, chairs, and vendors. They entered the old gate code. It failed. Again and again. My mother screamed into the intercom. I stayed silent and called Justin. Minutes later, his SUV blocked them in. He stepped out not as a gardener, but in a tailored suit, and calmly informed my father that there was no wedding for them. He wasn't staff. He was the owner. The land. The venue. The restoration. His. And Elisa's name was on the deed. They weren't arguing with their daughter. They were trespassing. 2 minutes later, their confidence collapsed. Begging replaced threats. It wasn't about family, it was about image, sponsors, and reputation. I spoke once through the intercom. This mattered when I built it. Dad, you told me to find a venue that fit my reality. I did. And you're not on the guest list. The line went dead. Our wedding was small. No sponsors. No cameras. Just people who helped us build something real. It was loud. Imperfect. And joyful. The next morning, I blocked my parents and my sister. Not out of anger, out of care. I planted an oak sapling by the entrance. I stopped letting people who never laid a brick tell me they owned the house. If you're building your own castle, don't let them take the keys when they wake up.